Hi everyone, we are Team 33 and this is our final project presentation for Visualization CSE 564. Today we are examining the critical question, are environment policies actually reducing greenhouse gas emissions? Despite growing policy implementation worldwide, global emissions continue rising. According to IPCC reports, we need 45% emission cuts by 2030 to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Yet, we are not on our track. Our project focuses on whether countries with higher environmental performances show scores consistent emission reductions, which policy categories correlate most strongly with emission improvements, how emission profiles vary across different countries, and whether regional or economic patterns reveal high or low performing country groups. Our dashboard explores not just who emits the most, but why emissions differs across countries, which sector contributes most, and critically, which policies are making a difference. As we'll see in the analysis, the relationship between policy strength and emission outcomes is neither simple nor straightforward. Our analysis integrates two comprehensive data sets. For the first one being the EDGAR Global Greenhouse Emission Database by European Commission's Joint Research Center. This data set provides harmonized emission data for all countries from 2012 to 22, including total GHG emissions in megatons of CO2 equivalent, per capita and per GDP emission metrics, breakdown by greenhouse gas types like CO2, N2O, and F gases, detailed sectorial distributions like power, transport, agriculture, etc. EDGAR's methodology ensures consistent measurements across countries, making it ideal for comparative analysis. The second data set we merged this with is Environmental Performance Index by Yale University. The EPI evaluates environmental governance across 11 issue categories under three policy objectives: environment health, including air quality, water quality, heavy metal exposure; climate change, which includes mitigation efforts and policy frameworks; ecosystem vitality, which includes biodiversity, forest, fisheries, agriculture. EPI scores range from 0 to 100, with higher scores indicating stronger environmental performance. Our country selection methodology was carefully designed to capture the full spectrum of emission profiles and policy approaches worldwide. We included 19 countries across four strategic categories, which are top GHG emissions, high EPI scorers, rapid emission reducers, and combination of high per capita emitters and vulnerable low-income nations. This diverse selection enables meaningful comparisons across different development stages and policy framework. Our dashboard links these datasets by country and year, allowing us to examine relationships between policy strength and emission outcomes. We also calculate year-over-year emissions changes to identify trends and policy impacts over time. Case Study 1: Global Emissions Landscape and Sectoral Analysis. Looking at our world map, China, the US, and India dominate total emissions visible through their darker coloring. When we toggle to per capita view, the picture shifts dramatically. Australia and Saudi Arabia emerge as significant per capita emitters despite total populations. Next, let's move on to the radar chart and select a few countries for our analysis. We have selected India, China, Saudi Arabia, the US, and Sweden. As we can see in the radar chart, it reveals how emission compositions align with economic structures. While CO2 dominates for all countries, each shows a distinctive pattern. China shows extended profiles across multiple greenhouse gases, particularly CO2 and CH4. Looking at the sector chart, we can see why. Its massive power industry and industrial combustion sectors reflects its role as the world's manufacturing hub and coal-reliant energy system. India shows higher N2O emissions, a clear reflection of its significant agricultural sector visible in the sector chart, where we see substantial agricultural contributions. The USA presents a carbon dioxide dominant profile with its emissions divided primarily between power and transport sectors. This balanced but carbon intensive distribution reflects America's car dependent infrastructure and diverse energy mix. Next, Saudi Arabia's petroleum based economy drives high emissions from fuel use with limited industrial diversity. It contributes to 6% of the global F gas emissions, disproportionately high given its population, mainly from cooling and desalination systems needed for its extreme climate. Sweden, by contrast, demonstrates dramatically lower emissions across all sectors, with transportation representing a proportionally large share, typical of countries that have already decarbonized their electricity sector. What's particularly revealing is how these three visualizations together tell a compelling story about each country's emission profile. The power industry is consistently the largest emission source globally, but the proportion of sectors varies significantly by country based on economic structure and development pathway. This integrated view confirms a critical thought. Meanwhile, meaningful global emissions reduction requires tailored approach based on each country's unique emission profile. For major economies like China, power sector transformation is essential. For resource exporters like Saudi Arabia and Australia, addressing extraction related emissions is crucial. For emerging economies with significant agriculture, sustainable farming practices become a key. And for developed nations like the USA, addressing transportation remains a persistent challenge.
For our second case study, we're going to be looking into development pathways and emission trends. Let's select a few countries. Let's select China, India, US, Germany, England, and Japan. Looking at the year-over-year change percentage emissions, our year-over-year change graph reveals powerful insights when analyzed alongside the policy indicators. Looking at the 6 countries selected, we can see a distinct pattern that tell a story about development pathways and policy effectiveness. Our chart highlights contrasting emission trends across countries over the past decade. For instance, Germany shows steady and steep decline post 2017, reflecting its robust environmental policies. England also follows a similar downward trajectory with some variability, but overall consistent improvement, particularly in the recent years. Japan's trend is more mixed, marked by intermittent drops and rises, indicating a moderate policy stand. The United States displays significant volatility, with declines offset by rebounds, mirroring shifts in federal leadership and climate priorities. China, on the other hand, transitions from rapid growth to a more stabilized pattern, signaling early impacts of stricter environmental governance. And in contrast, India shows a sustained positive growth in emissions, except during the pandemic, consistent with developmental focus. So, looking at the policy indicator chart showing the same countries, we discover patterns that directly explain the emission trajectories. Germany and England exhibit closely aligned policy profiles with consistently high scores in environmental health, especially in heavy metal management, where they nearly reach 100. Their parallel performance across sanitation, heavy metals, and waste management suggests the influence of coordinated European regulations. Despite only moderate climate change mitigation scores, their emission reductions are among the best, highlighting the effectiveness of integrated environmental strategies. Japan, um, looking at Japan's line, while excelling in environmental health, shows a sharp drop in climate mitigation, which sort of aligns with its less consistent emission trends. The United States shows a fragmented profile with strong scores in water and agriculture, but weaker performance in climate mitigation, mirroring its policy inconsistencies. China's profile reflects rapid improvement with rising air quality and forest scores, though the climate mitigation scores remain low, indicating prioritization of visible pollution and reforestation. India scores India scores lowest overall, but it shows a standout spike in biodiversity, reflecting a conservation focus amid limited industrial oversight. So countries that generally score highest in environmental health, um, they have moderate scoring in ecosystem vitality and lowest in climate change, except for European nations. This highlights a key insight. Strong traditional pollution control doesn't always translate to climate success. Germany and England, despite only having moderate climate scores, lead to emission cuts due to strong performance across all environmental domains. In contrast, China's strong forest policies haven't yet yielded in similar climate results, underscoring that sector-specific efforts must be a part of broader integrated policy framework to be effective. From our second case study, what we see is emission trends align closely with policy structure. Germany and England achieve consistent reductions due to integrated environmental frameworks. Japan's focus on environmental health without strong climate action explains its mixed results. US shows volatility tied to fragmented policies. While China's improving climate efforts shows gradual stabilization over time. Sector data completes the picture. Developed nations like Germany and England have more balanced emission with higher transport shares. The US stands out for high transport and power emissions tied to its car-heavy infrastructure. China's emissions largely stems from power industry, while India's comes from power and agriculture. The key takeaway of this case study is that effective emission reduction requires strong, aligned, and sector-targeted policies, not just strong climate scores. Bringing it all together, as concluding remarks, we have 5 key insights. First, while environmental policies improve carbon efficiency, they fall short in cutting absolute emissions at the needed scale, highlighting the core challenge of climate governance. Second, policy effectiveness varies by sector. Power generation shows progress, but transportation still remains a major challenge, even for leaders like England and Germany. Third, the link between policy and emission shifts by development stage. Wealthy countries have strong policies but high per capita emission. Middle income countries are improving, but emissions are still rising. Low income countries emit least but have weaker governance. Fourth, the vulnerability paradox is a stark. Those countries contributing least to emissions suffer the most due to climate change. Finally, integrated policies across multiple domains lead to better emission outcomes than single effort, as seen for Germany and England's consistent performance. Together, these findings call for action that go beyond efficiency, targeting absolute reductions, closing policy gaps in transport and buildings, and supporting vulnerable countries and ensuring fairness in global climate governance. Thank you. Okay, I will stop recording. Bye.